and welcome to episode 68 of Brews Less Traveled, the podcast exploring the best uncharted craft beer scenes across the United States. I'm your host, Brian, and I'm happy to welcome back my co-host for these Salt Lake City episodes, Molly. Molly, how's it going?
Hey, Brian. It is going wonderful here in Salt Lake, and happy to be back.
That's great. Yeah, you are actually reporting live from Salt Lake.
That I
How's
am.
the trip
Yeah,
been so far?
It's been great, actually. You know, started off Friday, kicking on over to Portland, and got here in Salt Lake on this past Monday. So always love coming here. I mean, scenery is beautiful. I have like mountains right outside of my window right now. Had some good beers, saw some good friends. So no complaints so far.
Yeah, Salt Lake City is a wonderful city. I was actually just talking to my friend Sven, who used to live out there. He was a student at the University of Utah, and we were talking. He was a home brewer. He's one of the people that actually got me into home brewing, and we were actually talking about our guest tonight and the former life that our guest had before opening Bewilder. That will be a topic of conversation.
Yes.
I am happy to hear that you are enjoying your trip out there, not only because, I hope you have a good time, but because I'm the one responsible for booking that travel, and I'm glad to hear that it's working out.
Yeah, actually definitely ideal this time around. Hotel is great. Flights were great. No complaints, man.
Did you get out to see bison yet?
So unfortunately, no bison, but I have a whole nother day, so I'm still determined. It's on my scavenger hunt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Salt Lake City scavenger hunt. Sounds fun. Yeah, so we got an episode. We got an episode to do today. And on this episode, we're going to be featuring beers from our friends at Bewilder Brewing Company, as I mentioned before. Our beer subscribers got some awesome inclusions from them this month. And Molly and I are going to be enjoying their ESB and Vitruvian Pils.
Very excited for both of these beer. Actually, two styles that I have not had in a very long time. So excited to drink them all with you fine folks today. And more importantly, we have an awesome guest that will be joining us as well here today. So, I mean, I think without further ado, please join me now in welcoming the owner and head brewer at Bewilder, Cody McKendrick.
Woo.
Woo.
Yeah.
Happy to be here, guys. Thank you. Great.
Hey, Cody.
How's it going,
Awesome.
Molly?
Should we kick it off?
Should we get in?
Yeah, let's
Let's drink beer, or I can tell you where to find Buffalo. There
Ooh,
are
that's
Buffalo
going to
here.
be, yes, all right. That will put me ahead in this scavenger hunt. But we're going to start with the ESB. So while we crack this open, Cody, what can you tell us about this particular beer?
Well, ESB is kind of a funny family of beers. You know, ESB specifically like English special bitter or extra special bitter. Either way, I guess specifically refers to Fuller's beer in England, but in reality, it's kind of a family of beers. By style, ours falls on the bottom end of like the strong bitter and the top end of the best bitter categories. But, you know, we wanted to be as true as possible to style with all of these classic beers we do. So, you know, we import 4 malted Maris Otter from Chris Malting to do this beer, and we use all English ingredients. We have English water profile. We build the water profile in all the beers we do. So we wanted it to be, you know, as authentic as possible. And as a home brewer, this was one of the first styles that I really started to fall in love with, because you really couldn't find any good examples of them locally. And I wanted to know, what's it feel like to drink a beer like an English pub beer? You know, we don't have that in Utah, let alone probably anywhere else. So it was literally the first beer we brewed on our big system here. And it was the first beer we released once we were able to release it. And we've been tinkering with it a little bit ever since, but, you know, we're pretty happy with it. In the tap room, we have a nitro version of it. And then it took a bronze medal in the NABA International Beer Awards this spring. So we're pretty proud of that.
That's great to hear. I read on a description online that it has a not so secret crystal malt.
Yeah, a few years ago, that's probably more than a few at this point, I fell in love with the Simpsons DRC, the double roasted crystal 120. And so anybody who's ever come into our homebrew store knows that I'm a big fan of the DRC 120, and that's the not so secret crystal malt. I just think it's got a really neat character.
This is absolutely delicious. I don't know how I missed the nitro tap version of it. I might be heading over there after this to give that a whirl then.
Yeah, we have it right now. We don't always have it. It kind of comes in and out. When we make this beer, we'll package off a couple barrels of it to do nitro, and it lasts as long as it lasts. Usually, maybe a few weeks to a month. But yeah, it's really good on nitro too, obviously.
Yeah, this is wonderful. This is, as you mentioned, the style, the family of English pub ales. This is one of my favorite styles, and personally, I hope it sees a resurgence similar to Pilsner and crispy beers, because this is exactly the type of beer I want to drink all day. In addition to the wonderful flavor or wonderful aromas, this is actually a gluten reduced beer.
Yeah.
Cody, can you tell us what that means? What do you do to a beer to make it gluten reduced, and how is that different from something that might be called gluten free?
Well, gluten-free beers are really difficult to make because they have to begin from completely gluten-free ingredients, sorghum, tapioca, brown
Millet.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then you have to clean out your mill and everything that transfers grain from one place to another. It's a big process. And I totally respect and appreciate people that go through that process. And we've got friends that are gluten sensitive or, celiacs. So we use an enzyme called, it's Brewers Clarex, or on the homebrew side, it's called Clarity Firm. And it's really an enzyme designed to break down proteins that cause chill haze. But the net result is it drastically reduces glutens in beer. And so generally a beer that's all barley or mostly barley, maybe a little bit of wheat, will drop below 20 or even 10 parts per million gluten, which most of our friends that have sensitivities seem to be perfectly fine with. And it gets rid of any potential for chill haze, which I guess is a nice benefit too.
That's
You guys
nice.
you have a Kolsch that's also gluten reduced, right?
Yep. Yeah, we do the Kolsch that way. The Vitruvian is also done that way.
Okay.
We figure these core beers that aren't real hoppy, we do it that way. The hops can kind of interfere with the process of that enzyme, and it's really easy to do. It's not particularly expensive, and there's enough people that come through our tap room that are appreciative of that it's worth it for us to do.
Absolutely.
We have a question in the chat about the can of this ESB. Why the jackalope on the can?
That's a great question. We call it the Bewilder beast because jackalopes they're not native in Utah. No, I mean, I wish I had a really cool origin story. We worked on a couple different naming ideas for the brewery. The original one was the Abominable Beer Company, but there was some, trademark issues with Hub up in Portland, and we didn't want to step on anybody's toes. So some of the branding we had from the Abominable Beer Company were these mythical monsters and kind of, mythical animals, and the jackalope or the Bewilder beast kind of became our calling card. It kind of became our go-to, mascot, so to speak. We've got a jackalope in our tap room that we decorate with all sorts of stupid festive things over the holidays. So it's fun. It's our spirit animal.
I love it. I feel like with that too, you guys, you opened up in 2019, and I think we all kind of know what happened after that. But what happened within that first year? How was business? How did you guys, were able to kind of come out on the other end of that?
Yeah, it was sweet. It was really awesome. Yeah, I mean, everybody's construction project starts the same way, over time and over budget, and we were totally there, and we did our construction ourselves. I had to learn how to be a general contractor and learn how to build a place, and so we opened 6 months late. And this isn't one of those goofy Utah liquor laws. It just happens to be that in Utah, you have to have a business license to apply for the manufacturing license. And the city we were in, Salt Lake City, won't give you a business license until you pass your final inspection. So we were ready to open, but we hadn't even applied for a manufacturing license. So what I ended up doing is I went into 8 different breweries around here that were generous enough to give me, the time of day, and I brewed 8 different collaboration beers. And we opened with those, bought them just as a bar, and sold those in December of 2019. And then our beer went on January 16th of 20, and then we got shut down March 16th. So yeah, it was brutal. We were already struggling with cash at the time because we were over budget, and then we got caught into the whole thing. I kind of feel responsible for the pandemic, in some ways, but we just kind of kept going. We'd been in the keep your head down and take steps forward mode for a year during the build out, and we just kind of kept going that way. And we still, for the most part, are in that mode. It's been a battle. We felt like this year was really year one for us. The first year and a half were kind of throwaway years. You know, you can go into it with all the different best intentions of, hey, we're going to go and we're going to focus on these traditional English and German beer styles and kind of draw a line in the sand and say, this is us. And if you don't like that, that's okay. And there's lots of people doing other stuff that's great as well too. But man, when you're measuring your customers on one hand every day, you just kind of start making whatever people are looking for and trying to have a wide variety. And so we got a little bit away from what we wanted our core beers to be, but we feel like we've landed in a nice spot where we focus on the traditional European styles and also brew a lot of fun, innovative hoppy beers too.
Awesome. You kind of alluded to, you know, kind of brewing things that people want to drink. Is there any favorite kind of beer that you brewed within that time that was a little crazy, a little off the rails, something that like you normally wouldn't have brewed? What would be the craziest thing that you did kind of within that year?
Oh, well, I mean, I like beer flavored beer. So anything that doesn't taste like beer is out of my realm personally. I mean, not to like, I mean, the industry has lots of creative brewers out there, and that's awesome. It's not necessarily my place in it, but we did a really fun beer that was roasted pineapple and chipotle pepper, blonde ale. And I really liked that. I judged a cider once that used roasted pineapple. Like we caramelized a pineapple in the kitchen and then used 200 or 300 pounds of pineapple and a bunch of chipotle peppers. And that was a super fun beer. But I'm light-handed, you know, a lot of people want to see a beer that says roasted pineapple and chipotle and have them kick you in the teeth. But I just want those to kind of accentuate the base beer.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. And, you know, sometimes we get credit for that. And sometimes people are like, oh, I wish I had more chipotle. But it is what it is. You can't please everybody, you know?
Right.
We had fun.
Very true. Yeah. Nice. Good.
It's almost like you approach those beers as if you're a European brewery, as if you're a traditional brewery, taking the same approach of balance and putting things together as one cohesive piece.
Yeah.
And then people are like, well, why isn't it overwhelming? Why isn't it too much?
And that's fine. And you know what, there's our line in the sand, you know, there's lots of breweries that really brew to the extremes on stuff like that. And that's amazing. There's a lot to be learned from what those guys are doing and women, those men and women are doing. But yeah, I appreciate balance, and I appreciate the difficulty of integrating unusual ingredients subtly into beers. So it's fun to try and crack those nuts, you know, and we don't have the opportunity, we don't have the ability to test batch, at least back then we didn't. So we were just going straight to the big system and crossing our fingers and hoping it turned out good.
So you guys followed what I like to call the Ken Grossman model. And before starting your company, you and your co-founder were running homebrewing stores in Utah. Ken Grossman, the founder of Sierra Nevada, famously saw the minimalist setup at New Albion Brewing and then was inspired to go from homebrew shop owner to brewery founder. So I'm curious, what was the tipping point for you and Ross, the other founder?
Yeah, I mean, it was always meant to be like a stepping stone to opening a brewery. When we opened our first brew shop in 2011, you know, and if everybody who has a full-time job that wants to open a business realize it's really hard to do, because, you know, opening a business is a full-time job and having a full-time job is also a full-time job. So, you know, the idea was, we'll get this going, and then down the road, we'll be able to use that flexibility to open something else. But what we didn't realize is like the can of worms that we kind of got into. We got into the homebrewing industry right at the right time, right after the recession was kind of finishing and people were coming out of it with a little bit of money finally, and unemployment was starting to come down. And we just got really big, really fast, way bigger than we expected, really fast. And at one point, you know, we were the biggest homebrew customer for BSG, Brewery Supply Group, on the west side of the Mississippi, which is pretty big.
Wow.
We were going through 20, 30 pallets of freight in a month. We'd burn a 2,000 pound pallet of base 2-row in, I mean, 5 to 6 days. Sometimes we were really pushing through material.
That's absurd.
And so we just grew it and rode the wave and opened a second store. And then, you know, eventually 2014, 2015, things started plateauing and heading back down the other way. And it gave us the opportunity to step aside and be like, all right, well, now we can start working on this brewery project. And we had already seen a lot of people that we'd worked with on the homebrew side make the jump to professional brewers. And it's kind of easy to gauge where you're at versus where they're at as brewers and what you might be able to do. So yeah, it's been fun, but that was always the original goal. And we started that project in earnest in 2017. And then 2018, we figured out our financing, and 2019, we started the massive project.
Damn.
Well, this ESB was delicious, so I'm very excited to jump in to our Pilsner next. So I'm going to bust this open. And while we open this, Cody, what can you tell us about the Vitruvian Pils that we are about to enjoy here?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite beers, probably my favorite beer we make.
Ooh.
We're, in the spirit of collaboration, obviously our brewery couldn't have existed without collaborating with a bunch of other breweries. And we wanted to be a part of the brewing community and a part of the community at large. And so we had an opportunity to work with the museum here locally called the Leonardo. They have a big convention center or conference space. They do special events, and they're always buying beer. And so we schemed up this beer in the Italian Pilsner side, which is kind of like a dry hop German Pilsner. And the idea is that Leonardo himself was born in Italy and died in France. So this beer is 100% Italian malt and 100% French hops. And we think that's cute.
That's awesome. I love that.
That's cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Bar Brews hops and Mistral, is that the other hop that's used? Oh, did we lose Cody?
That's delicious. Oh no.
Oh boy. It wouldn't be
Cody.
Brews Less Travel without technical difficulties.
Come back, Cody. Well, in the meantime, I hope, since I'm in my hotel room, I hope you can all see this beautiful glass that can't really, but I have the really cute little plastic glass to be enjoying all of these out
Proper
of. So no
glassware.
judgment today, please. Yeah, really going on the
Yeah.
other end of that.
It's not proper glassware unless you don't have to rip a single-use plastic bag off of it before you
I tell you, yeah.
go to use it. Well, there goes Cody officially.
Is that enough of us already, Brian? This is only the second time as a co-host. I'm already having quite an appeal here.
I'll be honest. I totally prepared myself for you to have internet problems, and there we go. He's
Me
back.
too. Yeah, found him.
Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened there. Lost
No.
all my internet.
No,
No, it's all good. We were just saying, it wouldn't be an episode of this podcast without someone having technical difficulties. It's just a shame that it was you and not Molly or I.
Yeah. I did very quickly there. I believe it was RJ that just wrote the chat to see if Bewilder was a stop with CBT here, and it is. It is. We are there often. We use them quite often as one of our meal stops as well. So on our tours, we do add a food and beer pairing component, and at Bewilder, we just have an absolutely excellent time with both the food and the beer. So come on out to Salt Lake, and we'll bring you on over.
Let's take a beer break. Did you know the United States has 63 national parks, with 5 of those located in the state of Utah? The Beehive State is home to Arches, Canyonlands, Bryce Canyon, Capitol Reef, and Zion National Parks, the Mighty Five as they're known collectively. 2 of these are located in the town of Moab, Arches, and Canyonlands. Arches National Park is home to the iconic Delicate Arch, which can be seen on the state's license plate. Eroded sandstone has given way to striking towers, balancing rocks, and of course, over 2,000 arches, all preserved in the 73,000-acre national park. The largest of Utah's national parks, Canyonlands, is nearly half the size of the state of Rhode Island, and like Arches, offers many beautiful rock formations with the addition of seemingly endless deep canyons formed by the Green and Colorado rivers. Canyonlands can be seen prominently in the first season of HBO's Westworld, as most of the filming took place in the large park. Now, let's get back to the show. Bar Brews is this kind of a new French hop that I have some friends here in Pittsburgh that have been using it for a few years now and really like what it's putting out. But Mistral is not one that I have heard of. What do you like about that hop, and what is it bringing to the table in this Vitruvian Pils?
So Mistral has got a nice kind of herbal, flowery character to it. And I think, if you look at Tipo Pils or some of the more famous Italian Pilsners, Pivo, they're a little more floral than they are fruity, and Barber Rouge has a lot more fruitiness about it. So the Mistral brings in a little more of that herbal, earthy, grassy, flowery note. I think by itself, it's not particularly outstanding, but it's a nice hop to layer behind something else. It gives complexity. We've used Mistral, and the other one is, well, I'll think of it in a second, of course, but we've used a couple other of the French hops, and they're fun. We really like them.
So to continue with the Italian Pilsner thing, it's a style that's starting to pop up a lot more on craft beer menus. Why do you think this very hop forward style of Pilsner stayed somewhat obscured until recently?
Well, I don't know why it stayed obscured, but I know why it's getting popular, because it's awesome. I mean, the whole story is that, I forget the gentleman's name that was brewing in Germany, but you can't dry hop beers in Germany. And so he moved to Italy and started dry hopping, and, thus was born Tipo Pils and the whole family. And I think it was a pretty extreme beer for Europeans to kind of take in because of the big hop aroma that came off of it. But to Americans that are just into hopping everything really aggressively, it kind of became, similar to what an American Pils is, but a little softer, not as aggressive. And it's nuanced, it's subtle, and it's got a lot of complexity, but it's just crusher, man. You can sit, in front of your barbecue and smash those beers, which I do frequently. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, this is absolutely delicious.
Yeah, we're proud of it. It made it to the 4 out of 5 tables at the international, or at the World Beer Cup, in the big boy category, with all the big, all the big European brewers and pale international lagers. So we figured it's as, if that's to be believed, it's at least as good as 80% of the lagers out there. We'll fine tune it a little bit and see if we can get further next year.
Did you send some off to GABF this year?
We did, yeah. It's tough for us because we only have 4 fermenters here at Bewilder, and we're trying to keep up with our tap room. So we really can only send what we have that's fresh. And so the batch that we sent was pretty fresh. So we're pretty stoked on it. It was a good batch. But sometimes we want to send a beer and you have to register months and months in advance, and you get down to it and you're like, oh, this batch is 3 months old. Just what you got to do. We're not able to metal farm or compete really aggressively that way. But when we're able to make fresh beer and send fresh beer, we feel pretty good about what we're able to send, and we're proud of it. I was a competitive home brewer. The guy that brews with me, Steven Engel, he's a really amazing brewer. So when we're able to dial in a beer and really focus on it and send it fresh, we feel pretty good about what we're going to get.
Absolutely. So I've been to Utah now a few times, and prior to coming in, you hear some different things about the alcohol laws. So since there's a lot of certain restrictions, particularly in this state, how does that affect your approach when you are designing recipes, since, kind of being both an owner and a home brewer standpoint? How does all of that kind of play into what recipes and what beers you guys are producing?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. So in Utah, historically,
we got time. Here we go.
Yeah, well, I don't know if because I can, on both sides of it, I can answer that. So, historically, Utah was limited to 4% ABV, which is 3.2 ABW. So a lot of the 3.2 beer stuff comes from that time. In October of 19, they switched to 5% ABV for draft laws, and anything over that has to be packaged in a can or bottle. And going back to when we brewed those collaboration beers, and the neat thing about that is all of the breweries were just like full steam ahead trying to produce beer at 5% to replenish the market, because they had just switched over. So all those breweries, it took time out of their production schedule to fit us in. It was not easy for them at that time. So for us, the 5% beer works pretty good because most European beer styles fall pretty comfortably in that range, and it gives us a little more flexibility. The IPAs specifically are difficult, because you can't make a nice IPA, traditional IPA at 5%, in my opinion. It's just missing out a lot. So we have to do everything in cans, and that sucks. And then because of that, we have to have a different license to sell out of our own tap room those cans. And then the cans are taxed 16%. So for an example, if I sell an IPA at $3.50 a can to go, and I sell the ESB at $3 a can to go, because I pay 16% taxes, I actually make more money on the ESB than I do the IPA. But you got to stay in a price point people are willing to pay, so it's tough. But and there's environmental reasons, You know, does it make any sense that a brewery like ours that's 95% tap room has to package stuff in cans, pour it in a glass and throw the can away? You know, and Saltfire, I think you guys had Saltfire beers in your box. Saltfire until recently was a bottle brewery, and their tap room is all bottles. So if you go in there, they literally would bottle something in back, come out, pour it in a glass and throw the bottle away. It's like, man, how wasteful. So it's stupid laws. Well, there's a lot of states that have stupid laws. That's one of ours. But you know, if we wanted to move to a place that had better liquor laws, it kind of tells me what my priorities are in life. And you know, beer is fun, but I like hanging out in the mountains a little more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Salt Lake City is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Even if you do have to deal with that, and thankfully they did bump it up, like you said, in 2019. You know, the OG days of baseball beer are. I guess I don't want to say long gone. It's 1% more, but it's definitely makes a difference.
It does, you know, and most of our beers fall right at 5%, and that's not necessarily our design to brew right to style, but you know, on a 10-barrel brew house with the efficiency we get on it, like a barrel almost always ends at like 1048 to 1050, you know, 12 to 12 and a half Plato. So we end up right at 5% anyway. So it's better than keeping half bags around. We just, you know, end up there, which is nice.
You don't have this mishmash of curled over bags at the end of the year. Like, oh, I guess we're going to brew a kitchen sink beer.
Well, I mean, we're not above kitchen sink beers, but we typically, we try to be like, that's one beauty thing about having the brew shop, right? Is that we try to be efficient with how we're using grains. But if we have, if we have like partial bags of grain, if I have 12 pounds of crystal red rye, I'll just ship it to the brew shop and, you know, make a recipe on the board for homebrewers to use. And if I need 11 pounds of golden naked oats, instead of burning up a bag, I just buy it from the brew shop. So we have that kind of advantage that I'm able to pull. We have like 90 grains in the brew shop. I can pull from the brew shop and get access to a lot of different grains that probably aren't economical for other breweries to keep on hand.
That's pretty awesome.
So
coming up, we're recording this on the 14th. It'll go out next week. But coming up this weekend on the 17th is the inaugural I always struggle with this word. The inaugural Utah Brewers Guild Collab Fest, where over 30 breweries are collaborating on beers especially made for this event. Bewilder teamed up with Bohemian Brewery out of Midvale, Utah, to brew a UK Golden Lager. Can you talk about this event and like what that means for the Utah beer scene?
Yeah, the guild kind of had a bad consumer reputation after some of the legislation went through for, like we just talked about, the draft laws, because the guild was pushing one way and the consumers thought that was counter to what they should be. So it's nice for the guild to get behind something that the consumers can go out and enjoy. Just like everywhere else, I suspect Utah's got a very tight-knit brewing community. So it's fun for the brewers to be able to work together. The Bohemian has been an all lager brewery forever. It's all they do. And they triple decoct everything. And it's really fun. And they're right by our homebrew store. So we have a great relationship with those guys down there. And so we wanted to brew something that was a little bit outside of their wheelhouse and, you know, a little bit in our wheelhouse. So we kind of used all English ingredients. So we used Golden Promise and a bunch of English Crystal and Biscuit to make our English lager beer. We call it Goldie McBiscuits, excuse me. And it's delicious. It tastes like gold biscuits. It's a good beer, but the Guild Fest will be fun. It's a way for the Guild to generate some revenue to use to help lobby the legislature to change some of the more annoying laws that are here in Utah. I know I'm personally working on some legislation to create a taproom law to allow breweries like ours if it's brewed on premises, to dispense anything across their own drafts, no matter what the alcohol content, which feels like kind of a no-brainer. And for us, like Utah's really concerned about overconsumption. But if I make, I have a barrel-aged beer that's over 13% and I have to sell somebody a 16-ounce can of it, that's a lot of beer for somebody to drink at 13+%. And it almost feels like they're forcing us to serve that much. And so, we can take an environmental stance to, say, hey, we're saving waste, an economic stance that it frees up liquor licenses that the state controls for bars to actually use those instead of breweries who don't really want to sell spirits. But then it allows us on a beer like that, I can sell somebody an 8 or 10 ounce pour, which is just way more reasonable for a beer like that. Nobody needs to drink. I mean, that's not fair. Lots of people need to drink 16-ounce beers like that, but maybe you should do that at home, or maybe just have one.
Oh, I love it.
It's night
No, that
juice.
makes sense. Yeah, that's those nightcaps. That makes sense. That's yeah, I would really like to see all of the beers on draft. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit here, and I'm slowly figuring out that I have a weird thing with bison now. So have you had any encounters with bison, animals? What's your best wildlife in Utah story that you can let us know about?
Oh man, wildlife in Utah. A few years ago, we had been on a 4 or 5 day camping trip and we needed a shower. So we stopped at some little KOA cabins outside a little national or state park, state park called Kodachrome Basin. And we're sitting there looking out the window and there's a bobcat sitting on the fence post outside our door. We're like, well, that's not awesome. So we kind of sat there watching it, and then we noticed that it had a collar on. And it turns out that the people in the cabin next to us were from Wyoming and had rescued this little bobcat as a kitten and raised it as their pet. And it was basically just a domesticated bobcat. So that was pretty cool.
Wow.
But we run into a lot of wildlife. Utah's got some cool stuff. We've got 2 buffalo populations that are totally native. They weren't transplanted. They've exist nowhere else but that region. They've never gone anywhere else, which is kind of cool. They're isolated, but yeah, it's pretty neat to have some stuff like that.
Where's the other one? I know Antelope Island. I've been there and seen those bison. Where's the other one?
So antelope is transplanted there.
Antelope is transplanted.
Yeah, but I mean they're Utah native. They come out of the Book Cliffs, but the Book Cliffs specifically, and then there's a little mountain range, not very little, it's actually huge, called the Henry Mountains. And the Henrys are surrounded by desert on every side, and they just kind of come out of nowhere. And that buffalo herd is, I guess you'd say, endemic to that region. But yeah, they're genetically pure. They have always existed there, and they weren't transplanted. They just live there.
I mean, of all of the things I had in my bingo card, like a domesticated bobcat, though, really was not on it. So that's quite a tell.
Yeah, I mean that's our next beer name, domesticated bobcat.
I think you got it. Yeah.
We always come up with dumb names after the fact because we hate naming beers, and then we're like, oh, we should have named it that. That's funny. Mm-hmm. It's funny to me, funny to some, probably not funny to anybody else.
So that's the best, Cody. That's the best type of funny. And then as soon as people start telling you, oh, this is funny, you should do more stuff like that, then you can be like, it's old hat now. Yeah. We had a Schwartz beer called the Druish Princess, and people were like, I don't get it. I'm like, what, you never watched Spaceballs? Like, come on, it's the Druish Princess.
Incredible. There was actually, I think, for one of the first tours that we took out here, we got that as a sample for, the guests that were on the tour. And yeah, we had some, like, people were like, I don't get the reference. And I almost kicked them off the van. Like, what do you mean? This is such a, like, I absolutely love that name. And obviously the style of the beer really just correlated well with it too. So
yeah, we have, Hazy Boy and Dose Hazy Boy and El Fruity Boy. And we had Whistle Go Woo. That was another fun one. Woo woo.
Whistle go woo woo.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
you've seen it.
Woo woo.
I wanted to change the name of the Italian Pilsner to Space Lasers, but I don't think people would have got that either. But
I would have fully supported that.
Love it. Yeah. Nope.
Yeah. We don't need to go further on that. So we talked about bison. Yeah, from the sky. We talked about bison. We've talked about domesticated bobcats. We've talked about the jackalope.
Wildebeest.
The Bewilder Beast. Cody, have you ever seen the North Shore Monster?
Oh, that's the Great Salt Lake one?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, who hasn't? I mean, it's like a ritual in elementary. You go on a field trip out to the Great Salt Lake and you see it. No, I was like 30 before I even heard that one.
Yeah, it's certainly not. It doesn't. The North Shore Monster needs a better marketing team, because the one story that I read just basically ended with, most people thought it was a bison, but we're still going to keep telling this story that it was the Lake Shore Monster or the North Shore Monster. So
yeah. Oh, it sounds better. It's like a fish story,
I love it.
Bunch of salt miners saw this monster with the head of a horse.
Yeah, the Great Salt Lake's funny right now. The water is lower than it's ever been in known history, and there's like, years ago, covered wagons started being uncovered when the water was really high from like the Donner Party crossing, and now it's way lower than that. But there's all kinds of weird stuff that happens in there.
Man, what do you think, now that we're kind of more on the, over Utah realm terrain, if you will, but overall, like, what do you think, or what is the one thing, I guess, that you wish either Utah or Salt Lake City was more well known for?
Beer.
Yeah.
No, I mean, Utah's got a bad stigma about beer here, and then for good reason. We had to brew 4% beer for so long, and in the 90s and early 2000s, you had to brew beer styles that people were familiar with. So you're making IPAs and porters and stouts and brown ales and so on and so forth, but they're all at 4%. So compared to beers that were brewed at a more appropriate strength, they didn't stand up super well. And now we can brew beers at a little more appropriate strength. And we're, a lot of the brewers here cut their teeth making those lower ABV beers. And because of it, they're really, really good brewers. It's hard to make a good beer at 4%. So like per capita, I think Utah's breweries win more national awards than any other state. We only have, 42, 43 breweries here right now. Only half the state is even going to drink. So if you take that math, we do pretty well. We do some really good beers, and nothing grinds my gears like someone saying, "Oh, this beer's from so and so else place, therefore it's obviously better than anything made in Utah." Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, because I've had some of the best beers, in the country here in Utah, and they just don't get the credit because people have this negative mindset of what Utah beer is supposed to be. And we're working on that, and more times people come here and sit in our tap room and some of the breweries around here, and they try the beer and they're always like, "Man, this is way better than I expected this beer in Utah to be." And like, that's kind of a backhanded compliment, but thank you.
Quality is the barrier for entry now. And anybody that wants to open up a brewery and maintain their business for any extended period of time has got to focus on pushing out quality beer. And I'm right there with you. I hate when I hear people like, "Oh, beer from so and so place, it can't be that good. Who's ever heard of that place?" Well, like, there's no mystery anymore, people. There's no mystery about how to brew good beer. It's pretty clear how to brew good beer. You just gotta put in the time and the effort. And doesn't matter if you're in Boston or the Midwest or the mountain region or in the South. There's good beer being made everywhere in this country.
I agree. And I agree 100%. The quality of beer generally across the board and across the country has gone up a ton in the last 10 years because, just opening a brewery isn't good enough anymore. If your value proposition as a brewery owner is, "We're going to make good beer," well, you better, because that's where you start. Then you have to go from there, and it's tough. It's a tougher industry than people think. It's not a giant money tree in the back that prints money and you just go on vacations across the world. But it's fun, and it's fun to see people in your tap room drinking the beers that you're passionate about that they may not have tried otherwise, like an ESB or an Italian Pils, and sharing that passion with other people.
Thanks again for joining us, Cody. Where can people follow Bewilder, and where can they find your beer?
So at all the normal social media spots at Bewilder Beer. Kind of sounds like Build-A-Bear, Bewilder Beer. But most of our beer is on site here. We do 96% in our own tap room. We're in a handful of bars around the downtown Salt Lake area, and we try to be strategic with that because we just can't keep up with distribution with four fermenters in a canning spot, not a canning line. But we're working on that, and hopefully we'll grow in the next couple of years and get some better distribution.
This has been awesome. The fact that you have to go to Bewilder, go into the tap room and buy the beer there is exactly a testament to why you should go and check out Salt Lake City's beer scene. They're small breweries, but they're producing excellent beers, classic two-style stuff, and you can get the crazy stuff if you want to. And hey, guess what? The city is absolutely gorgeous, and everything around it is gorgeous, and you're going to have a wonderful time. So go there, drink the beer. Thanks for tuning in. to this episode of Brews Less Traveled. You can find more from us at brewvana.com. That's where you can join the beer club and get great local beers like these from uncharted beer scenes across the country shipped directly to you monthly, while also helping to support this very show. You can also follow us on the social medias, all of them, at Brewvana. We'll be back next week with our next featured Salt Lake City brewery. But until then, stay safe, be kind, and support local breweries. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Hi, guys.
Thanks for watching Brews Less Traveled on YouTube. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more interviews with brewery professionals.